Yes, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, mic check, mic check. 1 2 1 2. All right, we in business. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your boy Real Leel, and welcome back to another episode of the Real Leel Show, where I get my unique takes going on in the world of sports and entertainment. And man, we got a show for you today. Obviously, the draft is about to get underway in another 2 hours. So we got some material coming your way. We all know the NBA is about to start. There's a lot of movements as usual in the NBA. And quite frankly, this is probably my favorite time of the year, free agency, more than I actually like real competitive basketball. Quite frankly, because there isn't no competitive basketball, because there's a lot of super teams being formed. But we're going to get into that in a few minutes. Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. And I'm going to introduce my guest here on the show. All right, a colleague and co-host and friend of In The Huddle sports show that we normally record on Mondays with Kenny C and Cam. We debate a lot, Zach. So, I'm glad that we able to come on this show and, give our thoughts on this episode. Zach, how you doing?
Yeah, man, Will, just wanted to say thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. And even though 48 hours ago we were just sitting in these same chairs, debating, I love doing this with you, man, and I really appreciate you having me on. And with the draft and the time of year, it's crazy because what month is it? It's November, and it's NBA free agency. We got the NBA draft going. I also find it very fascinating that the draft and free agency are 2 days apart. That usually is not the case. So I'm curious to see how that affects each and every team in the league.
Exactly. It's a lot to take in, and we're going to take it in right now with our first topic, and we might as well start it off. James Harden to Brooklyn is a lot of rumors. It hasn't been official yet, but James Harden has declined his $50 million extension added to his contract. It says, get me to Brooklyn. He tells the Rockets, listen, get me out of here. I want to go to Brooklyn. Zach, I don't know how you feel about this trade, but I'm not feeling it. I'm not feeling it. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think there are a couple ways to look at it. I think number one, there are two sides. The first side is going to say, all right, even though we all know Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and James Harden are all alpha personalities who like the ball in their hands, to be honest, I get the perspective that even though it may not work, this is the risk we may have to take in order to win a championship because, as you said when we just started off, there are so many other super teams forming in the NBA. Now, if I would do it and do I think it's going to work, those are, two different questions. And I think ultimately that's what the Brooklyn Nets are learning right now. So I think it depends on a couple of things. Number one, if I'm Brooklyn, I'm really not trying to give up my whole future in this trade. I think they've learned what they a couple of years ago in the trade with the Boston.
The worst trade in NBA history.
Yeah, they learned their lesson there, and they were irrelevant for years. But I feel like, Will, you're in Brooklyn, and, we both live in the state of New York. This has the potential to be a lot of hype for this Brooklyn Net team. I feel like could be the most anticipated season in the history of the franchise. And I feel like you're right. The recipe for success is, okay, if you want to have a couple stars, that's fine. But I think they really need to prioritize keeping at least one or two guys from that young core they have.
I've been very consistent, Zach, about how I feel about the Nets. And it's almost like a beautiful disaster. It's beautiful because Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, two of the biggest stars in the NBA. Kevin Durant, to be honest with you, at 100%, in my opinion, is the best player in the NBA. We can obviously debate about that because there's so much talent in the NBA. You have Kyrie Irving, great handles. My favorite person to go to a stadium and watch personally is Kyrie Irving. And there's a lot of excitement. But I know there's a disaster waiting to happen ahead, Zach. I really do. But it's a beautiful disaster. We love the hype. We want these guys on Brooklyn. But we know it can either mean one thing, a championship or a disaster. Nothing in between. And bringing James Harden can make it more of a disaster. And I'm going to tell you why. When you talk about the Nets a couple years ago making one of the worst trades in NBA history, and they was able to get back from that. They was able to build from the ground up. They had to build from the ground up. And you had Kenny Atkinson that was a coach that was able to develop these young players. You had guys like Karis LeVert, who we didn't know was going to be a star. He had a lot of injuries in college, and, he overexceeded the expectations, at least that I had for him. And then you see guys build that Nets team and build it back up. So where Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving could look at that team and say, this is an attractive destination. So I just feel like Kyrie and Kevin Durant, it's almost like a party, right? The Nets pre-Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant had the party on the block, and everybody was coming to the party. The party was jamming, and Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving came to that party. It was like, listen, I want to be the DJ, and I'm going to be the DJ. Get out. So that's how I kind of feel with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving based on some of the moves. It's like, you know what? Y'all already built this franchise up. Thank you. We'll take it from here. We're going to bring in DeAndre Jordan, even though, we still have Jared Allen there. We're going to fire Kenny Atkinson and hire unproven coach that never coached before. And now we probably going to trade Karras, Jared Allen and Spencer Dinwiddie. All right, bye. We don't need you no more. We're going to bring James Harden. I just find it, kind of, messed up in a way. And I just feel like it could be a disaster because, Zach, there's only one basketball. And it's two guys that are ball dominant. Kyrie Irving left LeBron James to be the guy, to be the number one guy. And now you ain't even going to be the number two guy on your team if James Harden comes.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting that you bring up the point about DeAndre Jordan, because I think that move in KD and Kyrie's head, they were probably just like, all right, we like Jared Allen, but like, come on, we don't know him. He's still super young. He's not one of our boys. I kind of got that same vibe when right before Durant signed with the Nets. You remember there were obviously rumors going around with him possibly going to the Knicks. And if you remember also, that was around the time the Knicks were still in the conversation for that number one pick, which was Zion. And I remember having that conversation, people saying, oh, does Kevin Durant even want to play with Zion? I agree, man. I think that these trades and the coaching hire and firing of Kenny Atkinson, it obviously has a lot to do with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. And it's interesting because, as you mentioned, when the Nets were rebuilding their team after that Celtic trade, Sean Marks was their GM, and he did an awesome job rebuilding their team, bringing in D'Angelo Russell, developing guys like Spencer Dinwiddie, and he's still in charge. And he's from Australia. He doesn't really have that much experience before this tenure with the Nets, running an NBA front office by himself. So I'm curious what he is thinking right now. Why hasn't a trade fallen through yet? Is he having second thoughts on the James Harden deal? I'm not sure. But at the same time, it's very risky. If I'm Brooklyn, I'm willing to trade LeVert because I think he's good enough to be a leading scorer on a good team. And to be honest, I understand why you're making that face. He's very good and talented. Don't get me wrong.
He is. I thought he could have been that third star.
It's just exactly. I see him more as a number one star, and ultimately I don't see that happening in Brooklyn. I think he's that good. And to be honest, I don't know if he's
my question. So you think Caris LeVert can be a number one star, but James Harden is a superstar. So, I don't see, how you can say possibly, all right, we don't need Caris because he could be a star on the team, but you're bringing in a superstar that's going to require more. That's going to require the ball more on the Nets.
As much as I hate to say it, man, it's just the NBA we live in today. Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant, they're gonna want James Harden, man. It comes down to that. And even though they're gonna say now that they want him, as you said, in 2-3 months, who knows? It's a risky move. But at the same time, dude, I do feel like sometimes you have to take risks in order to win championships. We saw in football the Chiefs do that with Patrick Mahomes. They had a really good quarterback in Alex Smith, and they made an unpopular move and drafted Pat Mahomes. Same thing with the Cardinals, Kyler Murray, all that. And I feel like with Brooklyn, right, not a lot of people like James Harden. I feel like out of all the superstars, if any of them gets hated on the most, he's the one. And we get why. He shoots a lot. He doesn't play an enjoyable brand of basketball, very inefficient. But at the same time, if you're the Brooklyn Nets and you're looking at it from this perspective, right, we have two superstars that are coming off of injuries, and Kevin Durant, in his case, very serious. So do they think that they're going to be able, with just KD and Kyrie leading the way, is that duo going to be able to beat that Laker team with AD, LeBron, and now they just add Dennis Schroeder? I think this move may be the only move they can make to possibly put them over the top. I'm not saying it's going to work, but I do understand if they do it, why they will.
I'm glad you brought up KD's injury, and I want to touch on that real quickly. But I also want to rewind to the point where you talked about sometimes you have to gamble and take risks. I don't think that's advice you want to give to the Nets, who already made a couple gambles that did not work in the past.
I think it depends what exactly they have to give up also. If I'm Brooklyn, I think I'm good.
You're probably going to have to give up the house. You're probably going to have to give up a lot of assets. The way how Houston is looking at it, they want to star. They actually want to star. I don't even know if Brooklyn has enough for what the Rockets want.
For me, I think LeVert could be that star. That's what I was saying earlier. If I'm Brooklyn, I'll give LeVert and I'll give Dinwiddie. I'm trying my best to hold on to Jared Allen, and I'm also really trying to re-sign Joe Harris because that's a very important piece of that team.
You need shooting. You can't just have guys dribbling out the clock. You need somebody to be a knockdown shooter. So definitely signing Joe Harris will definitely need to be a priority as well. But when you talk about KD's injury, that's probably the only – if you said, Lil, the only argument you can make pro James Harden to the Nets trade, I would say is that right there. The uncertainty with KD. We don't know if KD is going to be 100%. I'm pretty sure 80% KD is good enough to be a star, good enough to be amongst one of the best players in the NBA. So let's say you do get a James Harden there. Now you can kind of load manage Kevin Durant, and still be in contention because James Harden is more than capable of winning games by himself. Well, you also have Kyrie Irving in a solid team around him. So I think that would be the only way you can say that moves make sense, is that if you want to load manage Kevin Durant, don't want to give him too much pressure on that Achilles injury, and you want him to rest certain games, and damn well James Harden has what it takes to win you a couple games. I think that could be the only argument here. Otherwise, I don't see this working simply because, Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant are different species. I'm just keeping it real. For Kyrie Irving, I think Steve Nash is going to have his hands full. I really do. And to manage two superstars as a rookie coach is hard enough. Managing three stars on your team, one of them saying, "Oh, you're not going to be the only one coaching. I'm a coach some days." Kevin Durant, like, what the hell is that? Even Michael Jordan had a coach, and he was Michael Jordan. Even they had a system, the triangle, and he was the GOAT. So I just feel like, Steve Nash is going to have his hands full, and that's why when a lot of people was like, "Yeah, that's a creative hire," I was like, I'm not sure. Not because I don't believe in Steve Nash, and what he brings. I haven't seen him coach yet, so I want to give him that chance. I just don't know if he wants to take this environment on, this superstar status, diva personalities on in his first stint.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you think right now, when you look at the Brooklyn Nets, if they don't trade for James Harden and they have the same roster as they do right now once the season starts, do you think they could win a championship?
Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, man, you should want to take on this challenge and come out the East. You should believe in your talent, that you can be able to have another star next side of you and be able to still make your way out of the East. I think that this shows me that they're not that confident in themselves because they want to have an extra star. And it just goes to the environment that the NBA is right now with, player movement and creating super teams right now. They looking ahead to the Lakers and what they're doing, and it's causing them to react, I believe.
Yeah, that's a really good point when you bring up the Lakers. I was just going to make that comparison. Also, I think it's very interesting to see LeBron leading the Lakers front office even, and then you see KD and Kyrie leading Brooklyn's front office, and it's just very interesting to compare the kind of players both teams are going after. I think LeBron, when the Lakers made their offseason moves, they did a really good job building the team around him and AD with veteran players, guys that they knew LeBron would be comfortable with. And it's interesting because I feel like ultimately Brooklyn is kind of like torn down the middle here. Before KD and Kyrie got there, we said it. Brooklyn was playing really well. They had a really nice future and a group of young players. All of a sudden, KD and Kyrie come, and to be honest, they probably are like, we want to play with our James Hardens and just other good, solid veteran players that they've played with in the past, as opposed to playing with the Karis LeVert or playing with the Spencer Dinwiddie. Now, ultimately, it's going to come down to the front office and what do they think and what do they value. But at the same time, it's a complicated situation because Brooklyn, on one hand, you want to please your best players, but at the same time, you want to do what's best for your organization. So a lot of important decisions are going to have to be made.
And that's exactly why I wasn't too on board with Kevin Durant and the Kyrie Irving signing. But at the same time, the fact that you signed both Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, now you know that you have superstars, and that's what you want ultimately in today's NBA. You need superstars in order to win championships because of player movement. Now you got those two stars, but there's a headache that come with that, which is managing the personalities and exceeding expectations and not falling short of expectations. So the Nets are kind of in a good, dangerous, beautiful spot, if that makes sense. Beautiful in the sense that they have their stars and they should be a championship favorite, but can they exceed those expectations and fulfill those expectations? We have yet to see. But as we move on here, and this kind of connects with the Nets, in my opinion, because I'm gonna tell you why. A Russ and John Wall trade is being talked about. When I first saw this report, Zach, I'm not even gonna lie, I was like, these cats just want to trade just to trade. Yeah. I mean, you literally trading Russ for John Wall is the same type of player.
Like
ball dominant. Exactly. Ball dominant. Your second guy is probably not going to be as effective. We've seen it with Bradley Beal. We've seen it plenty of times with Russ when he played with Paul George, etc. And to be honest with you, this trade didn't make sense. But I thought about it and I said, what if Houston wants to make this move because they want to move Russ so they can get John Wall. This way, they can move the Nets. They can move James Harden to the Nets so they can bring in a John Wall and a Caris LeVert and a Spencer Dinwiddie because they always said they wanted a star. They don't want that, that young, players that have to prove themselves. They want a star. So that's what I said. This the only way this trade makes sense is if they want the trade Russ for John Wall. This way they can do the Nets deal and get rid of Harden, and they can bring in a Caris LeVert and a Spencer Dinwiddie and a Jarrett Allen. So this way you have John Wall and Caris LeVert, who's more than capable of giving you 20 points plus a night.
Yeah, I think one way to look at it is this. So when we were talking about James Harden and you were just saying, I don't think the fit's great, part of what made that conversation so interesting was that everyone is going to agree that James Harden is a top 10 player in the league right now, and he's worth a lot. To be honest, I don't know if I could say the same thing about Russell Westbrook. I kind of view him as, I don't want to say a net negative, but to the last couple teams he's been to, when have they gotten better? And I feel like that's a concern. Now, I agree with you when you say it's almost like they're trading just to trade. I feel like they're two very similar players at this point in their career. Maybe John Wall has a little bit of something left, and maybe he just needs to get out of Washington and a new change of scenery. Maybe that's the case. But at the same time, I do feel like if I'm the Rockets, I'm really trying to get Caris LeVert and trade Harden to Brooklyn because I'm telling you, I think that given he's still very young, given some time, he could be the best player on a really good team. And if I'm the Rockets, that you saw they traded Covington as well. I'm trying to trade Tucker. I'm trying to trade Gordon. I'm really trying to adapt to that. Okay, it's a new era. Daryl Morey's gone. If we trade James Harden, the rebuild is on. And I feel like they need to just start building their team like a conventional basketball team.
Another point, Zach, and obviously it all connects. It all connects. That's why I'm about to refer back to the Nets. When you're talking about a Caris LeVert, when I heard the reports of James Harden, I'm not sure how accurate this is because I haven't spoke to James Harden one-on-one. But from what I saw was that James Harden wants to do a 2-year stint with the Nets to finish out his contract and then move on elsewhere. So do you really want to give up a Caris LeVert, a guy that you can have down the line, a young star, for a guy that's just going to be there to hold up space, to, just be a placeholder and try to win a chip?
The only reason why I would say I think so is because in the NBA, which makes it so unique from any other sport, is that I feel like if you have that championship opportunity and you're not the Lakers, then you really have to take advantage of it. Look at the Rockets a couple years ago when they were one win away from beating the Golden State Warriors. I thought that team was good enough to win a championship, and Chris Paul got hurt, and they've really just fallen apart over the last couple years. Now, I think if I'm Brooklyn, the answer to your question is yes, if they really think that move is going to elevate them to the top of the league for two reasons. Number one, I just don't think – I think if you're Brooklyn, you have to look at the situation and say, all right, we're going all in, In the NBA, draft picks are worth something. I get it. But let's just say that's involved. They're probably going to have to give up a pick or two. They're going to be picking at the back of the draft order, so I don't really know how much those picks are going to be worth. And with Caris LeVert, dude, I think you're right. I think he's a really good player, and as I said, if I'm the Rockets, I'm really trying to get him. I just don't know if he's going to be able to do and get to his full potential in a Brooklyn Net uniform when he's going to be playing behind Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. So if I'm Brooklyn, that's kind of why I think I'd be leaning towards doing this deal. Not because I think it's all of a sudden going to work, just because I think this may be our best shot at beating the Lakers. And as good as Caris LeVert is, as good as Spencer Dinwiddie is, they're not James Harden. And ultimately, I think that risk may be worth taking to put you over the top.
Do you think that James Harden has any – do you think James Harden is wrong in regards to requesting a trade? Because you can say that where the Rockets stand right now should be in a rebuild. And I really do look at this in two ways. Number one, I think the Rockets should want to let it go. It's not going to happen. Daryl Morey is out of there. You may try to want to get a star back. It's probably not going to happen. Just rebuild. Right. But also, when I look at James Harden and him wanting out, I think personally that the Rockets did everything for James Harden over the last couple of years. They got him Dwight Howard, and Dwight Howard was still relevant. They got him a CP3. They went and got him on Russell Westbrook. They spent a lot of money trying to bring in guys. They wanted to get LeBron James at one point. they try to get LeBron. So they tried their best to surround James Harden with talent, but James Harden did not win these championships. And part of the reason was he didn't show up in some of these big games as well. So do you think that James Harden is wrong to say, I'm going to decline this extra $50 million extension and I want out and trade me? And do you feel that the Rockets is obligated to trade him where he wants to go, which is Brooklyn?
Right. So I think the first thing that comes to mind is, like, what is he doing turning down $50 million? Like, that's crazy. But at the same time, I just think in today's NBA, even though it really feels wrong, it's kind of like the norm. I think everyone in that Rockets organization right now has to realize, as you said, it's not working out. And I think we all have to move on, and that would be the best thing for all parties. So when you say, is Houston doing the right thing by, possibly trading him to where he wants to go? To be honest, dude, if I'm the Rockets, I don't care about that. If I'm the Rockets, I am focusing on trading him to the place where I think I get the best deal back possible. And to be honest, that's all I'm going for right now. If it's trading him to the Charlotte Hornets, if it's trading him to the Sacramento Kings, I don't care. I just want the best return package possible.
If it's deporting him to the Toronto Raptors, then we deporting the brother. But to that kind of argument, if you're one of those teams that's not the Nets, would you want to get James Harden knowing that he makes it clear that he wants to be with the Nets? Would you take that chance and knowing that he might not resign? Would you put all your eggs in one basket and say, listen, James Harden, we need to get him and try to convince him that he should stay with us, and we could do that with our culture? Do you take that risk?
Yeah, I think it really depends on the exact situation and what team you are. One team that's not named the Nets, that if I'm them, I think I'm going to trade for James Harden, is Philadelphia.
Yeah.
Because Ben Simmons right now, it's not really working out there. And the good thing about Ben Simmons is that I consider him to be a legitimate star in this league. I think he's a top 20 player. We could all agree on that. And I think that given his age of 23, 24 years old, he's still super young. I think if you're the Rockets, that's the perfect player for you to go get. Go surround him with shooting, bring in all the young talent you want, hold on to your draft picks. And I think from Harden's perspective, not only is Daryl Morey in Philadelphia, but I think if they make that trade, they could be really good. You have Harden, Embiid, Tobias Harris, a really good young kid coming up in Thibault, have a couple draft picks tonight. I think Philadelphia needs a change. They brought in Doc Rivers, and if I'm them, Ben Simmons, this whole thing, it's just bad vibes. The fans screaming at him for not being able to shoot. I think a change in environment would be good for both sides.